He failed on that one, and it could have been an interception.
From inside the 10, here he comes. Just never had a chance to shake loose, and he'll be brought down at the 24. Defense showing blitz here. They'll try the run. Knocked down for the tackle. And the Vols will hustle to the line. Off play action. Shoots it to the left. He makes a catch. He finally goes out of bounds, but you better check that laundry on the field. So the decision has been made, and the coach will take the penalty. Let's see what they do on third down. Oh, the defense moved in there too quickly. You think it's never going to work until it does, and that'll be a first down.
Encroachment, defense.
Defense just a little too eager, and that's 5 yards for the O. Here comes the offense on first down. Back to throw, it's Aguilar. Flips it out to the back. And just a short, safe pass play. They pick up a few. They're dealing with a second and long. They'll run it from the gun. They make the stop, but not before he takes a chunk out of what they need to move the sticks. Guys, this offense is already reeling down multiple possessions. Really need to cash in on this drive. Makes the catch. It's Thomas. They'll make the stop about a yard short of the first down. Trailing by multiple possessions in the third and desperately needing a score, they'll go for it on fourth down. They'll try to outflank him with the jet sweep. He's not going to get there. Stopped short on fourth down.
I think sometimes you can overthink things a little bit as a play caller. And on fourth down, I know you got a receiver who's really fast, and you're trying to get him the football and see if he can get to the perimeter of the field. But the defense was waiting on it. That was maybe a little bit too obvious, and I think you can put that fourth down fail on the play call.
Shakes off the defender. They'll knock him down for a loss of a couple.
The one thing you can say about this defense, they pursue the football. The first guy might miss, the second guy might miss, but there's going to be more and more hats flying to the ball carrier.
Catch inside the 30 and still running. They'll ride him out of bounds after the good pickup spotted at the 25-yard line. They go back to work in the final period of this one.
Florida State, 13, Tennessee.
First down for this offense. Lopez to pass. They've got the screen set up. And he was fortunate not to lose yardage on that play, able to wedge it back to the line of scrimmage.
And you're trying to get the ball to the running back quick and let him get some space, but there was absolutely no space. They penetrated quickly, and they got him before he could even get going.
Good, solid tackle.
Well, that's just an amazing individual effort, trying to get back as much yardage as possible to set up a third and manageable situation, right? Nice job in the open field, understanding the situation. You obviously cannot take a sack at this juncture on the drive, so do what you can do to put your offense in a good position here on third down.
Timeout called there by the defense, desperate to get the ball back and save as much time as possible. And here comes the field goal unit. Right down the boulevard, it's good. And now the lead is extended a little further.
Welcome to this College Ultimate Team Challenge presented by EA Sports College Football. Don't forget, you can check your goals in the pause menu. In this challenge, you'll be facing the Boise State Broncos. Now to my guys in the booth. Take it away.
Lopez wants to fire. Here's a heat. And that incomplete pass caused by the big hit on first down. Second down coming. Didn't connect last time. Let's see if they throw it again on second down. Back to pass. He slings it deep to the left. And it's incomplete, going for the massive explosive play instead. They're looking at a third down. Trying to pick up a first down. On third and long, doesn't need to take the check down. Picked off, and the opening drive is stopped with an interception.
And I tell you what, when defenses play zone, all eyes are on the quarterback. You have a zone to drop to, but you're setting on the quarterback, reading his eyes. Great job by the defense, understanding the ball was coming out, breaks on the football, goes and makes the INT.
This offense has it with really good field position. They'll send the tight end in motion. They go to the ground. And he runs into a wall. Maybe got it back to the line of scrimmage. The Broncos have put themselves in dire straits after that last play. It's second and a mile. Looking to fire. Pressure coming. Got it in the middle, it's Bates. The stop is made, but this offense is threatening. First and goal from the 9. On the doorstep of cashing it in for the offense. Wants to pass. And he drops it just a little too slippery in the hands. Defense rolls up deep in its own end on that last play. Now a second and long coming. Looking downfield, it's Madsen. Under fire. And they get him, and they'll lose yardage on that completion.
And I got to know on offense, right? When I get in this situation down near the goal line, I got to get physical, finish my run forward, not start dancing around, going all over the place, and losing yards. That's just
nowhere to go, and the ball is loose. Bounced right back to them. And it looks as if they're going to try a field goal. And the holder will put it down on the left hash, a 34-yard attempt coming. Good, right down the boulevard. And the first points of the day come on that field goal.
And you want a touchdown and you want to be aggressive, but man, right down the middle, that obviously gives me some confidence down the road that I can trust this guy.
From inside the 10-yard line, he'll bring it back. And he's able to pick his way through the traffic nicely for a good return on that one before he's brought down. Here's the snap, ready to cut one loose. Safe completion on the screen. And this one will be stopped for no gain. The screen always seems so easy until you find all of that traffic right in front, Jesse.
Yeah, and we see so many screens in college football these days. The ball getting spit out quickly. I think more and more defenses, Reese, today are just expecting it. They're practicing against it all week leading up to games. You can tell this defense well-versed right now in how to stop these types of plays.
Looking to the big tight end. Got his man downfield. Steps out at the 34-yard line. Big pickup on that one in this offense within striking distance. After the setback, the offense gets set for a 1st and 15. And he's able to shed one tackle and gets a pretty good pickup. Oh, they dial up on second and a long way to go. Lopez to pass. He'll take a shot. He's got it on the outside. And he's on his way. He'll go all the way. Touchdown, Noles. That had touchdown written all over it from the moment he caught the ball. Big play, big run for the Steelers.
Yeah, they had touchdown written all over it because nobody was covering it. It'd be a good idea to get a hand on him. You know, listen, I know you guys got some speed, and maybe you give him a cushion and give him some space, but that was a little aggressive on the space department there.
Kicker has everything lined up and about set to get this one underway. Looking for an alley from inside his own 10. And the returner could find no daylight. He goes down. Boise State ready to send out that offense. Jesse, they had to kick a field goal the last time they had it.
Yeah, and oftentimes early in games, you're just trying to find your rhythm. Some things work, some don't on that first drive, David. It'd be interesting to see what happens here in the second drive.
Yeah, feel for the defense now. You understand what they're trying to do, what their game plan is. Now you get to go into phase 2 of your game plan.
Pulls and fires it complete to the right. Found a little bit of room to operate, but he'll be stopped just short of the first down. And the Broncos come to the line on 3rd and short, looking to keep this drive moving. Catch in the middle, it's Wagner. And he'll have to check his fillings after that lick, but he did get the first down. Got it done in the passing game on the last play, and let's see what they do on first down. From the shotgun now, here's an inside give. And there was nowhere to go, just stopped in his tracks in the backfield. The Broncos now with a long way to go to pick up the first down. We're at the 2-minute timeout. It's been a good one so far. Opportunity for this offense perhaps to take the lead before halftime. Now on 2nd down. Looking to throw, it's Madsen. Fires into traffic, intercepted. Not a lot on the return, but they can live with that as they've got it at the 49. Snapped it in the shotgun. Moves around to clear up the vision. And the ball comes out. What a disastrous play. Defense falls on the ball. Going to be a turnover. From the gun, looking for a man. Pressure in his face, and he lets it fly. Just had to get rid of that one. Good job to fight another play. And the incompletion brings up a 2nd down for this offense. Wants to go up top. Oh, they're after him. And the defense will corral the quarterback, and down he goes at midfield. On 3rd and long, hoping to throw beyond the sticks. And the defense gets loose, bringing the heat, and down he goes again. They'll try to convert on 4th and long after giving up that big sack. Here comes the heat. They got him. It's a sack, and what a stop for this defense to turn it over on downs. Fires to the wideout and wings it incomplete.
I don't know about the decision that time by the quarterback. He may have been expecting man coverage, but that time the defense was in zone, and they did a really nice job closing the window. The intended target was not open, and that's why that one fell incomplete.
And he was able to run through one tackle, but still only a modest gain. And guys, they really need to make something happen on this 3rd and long. Complete pass will bring up 4th down. The offense calls a timeout to stop the clock. On 4th down, they'll pass for it. He's going to fire to the left. He caught it. He stopped just short of the goal line, but they'll have it 1st and goal from the 1. Lopez wants to fire. Setting up the screen. Oh, and he thought he had a chance to house him, and the defense tackles him at the 3. Running out of time here in the 1st half. They're going to have to be efficient to put some points on the board before the break. They're setting up the screen. He's on. Down to the 2-yard line. Just spectacular execution there. They'll use a timeout right before halftime. Maybe time for 1 or 2 more plays. And it's 3rd down, but they're going to go ahead and try the field goal and try to get points before the break. And this one is perfect. So they get the late field goal right before the half, and not much time after this kickoff for an answer.
I know they're trailing going into the locker room here at halftime, but kicking that field goal gives them a little bit of a jolt, a little bit of a boost of momentum that they can carry with them into the 2nd half. And there's a lot of football left to go here. I can't wait to see what happens.
They took the 3 on that last possession, and now they'll try to get it back on the onside kick. They were ready for the onside kick and executed perfectly, and they secure the football. Couldn't ask for better starting field position for this offense. Finds his man down the middle. He stopped just short of the goal line at the 1. An explosive play has him set up. And the Broncos trying to pay off the threat on 1st and goal. Power ahead. And he's brought down at the line of scrimmage, and the ball will stay at the 2. Can the D deny them on 2nd and goal? Here we go. Tight end in motion, see how the D reacts. They go right back to their man on 2nd and goal. Going right back to the well, and this time he finds water. Gets it into the end zone for the touchdown. Precision blocking up front. Created the open lane, and the running back followed it beautifully.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to follow an offensive line that makes those holes and just gives you a caravan all the way to the end zone. What an unbelievable job blocking up front.
From inside his own 10, let's see what he gets. And he'll be brought down after a solid effort on that return. Lopez to pass. Right on the money. They bring him down, but a solid pickup to put them in position to pick up a 1st down. Try to make up for some of that lost ground on 2nd down. Taylor has it. They've got it to the 49-yard line, and they'll move the chains.
And here we go. If you're an offense, you've got to get that ground game going so you can have some balance, and then you give it to your quarterback, Palmer, and let him make some plays down the field later on.
Yeah, exactly. And coming into this game, this offense knew they were going to have to some way, somehow, at least establish a semblance of a running game for exactly what you just said. You got to be able to use play-action pass later in this game to get some explosive plays down the field. And it's a play like that that we just saw, which can help them get that going.
And listen, as a quarterback, you're trying to find the matchup, trying to find who's open. I don't know if anybody was open, but that was not a greatly thrown football. I don't know if it was miscommunication, but the ball thrown out of bounds and just on to the next down.
There he goes. He gets it inside the 30 and out of bounds at the 29, and they are rolling. And the Noles are on the move. From the gun, running back gets to give. Not just hard-nosed running, that's cement-nosed running as he gets it to the 25. Plenty of work to do here on 2nd and long. Back to pass. Unloads to the wideout. Makes the grab. so close to that end zone. He could almost taste it, but it'll be 1st and goal for this offense. Trying to punch it in. They knock him down behind the line, and the defense finishing this 3rd quarter in style. They'll try to open this quarter by sticking it in the end zone here. They give him the rock again on 2nd and goal. That is a big win for this defense as they were right there as soon as he got the ball. This offense hasn't been able to find the end zone with a GPS and a slide rule. Can they finally get a touchdown on 3rd and goal? And he won't be able to get in as the defense gets him down at the 1.
And I like what this offense did, man. They stayed aggressive. They were trying to get the 1st down through the air. But here's the good thing now. You punt the football away. You trust your defense. You got the lead late in this football game. One more stop, and there's a good chance you get the W.
They spun that wheel of fortune on 4th down and come up bankrupt. From his end zone, trying to loosen up this D. Line getting set on 2nd down. Sends it back in motion. Back to throw. It's Madsen. He's got it. They make the stop, but not before he takes a chunk out of what they need to move the sticks. 3rd and short. They've got them back up inside the 20, and the D can get the ball back here. From the gun, wants to pass. And it's incomplete on 3rd down.
I want to give a shout out to the defense there on 3rd down, doing a really nice job disguising their coverage because it looked like they confused the quarterback on 3rd down. Really nice job getting back into that zone and making sure that ball falls incomplete.
And he earns a 1st down, and boy, did he earn it. Taking that lift. Clock stops. We have reached the 2-minute timeout, and the offense is looking for a play to close this deal out. He's looking to throw. Under fire. And he's all bottled up, and now it's worse. The ball's loose. Defense swarming on that loose ball. It'll be a turnover. Great place to start for this offense. They'll keep it on the ground to keep this clock moving. Defense uses a timeout quickly, trying to get that ball back and preserve time for their offense. 2nd and long here, but objective number 1, keep that clock moving. Using the quick game. That one takes it down to the 13-yard line. Quick timeout called by the defense, stopping the clock to save as much time as possible for their offense. And the last thing they need is to squander this great field position facing a 3rd and long. Knocked away, incomplete, and quarters get tight in the red zone.
And the offense got themselves in a tough situation. 3rd and long, so hard to execute, especially when the field starts to shrink. But the good news is they got a field goal in their back pocket.
Fires into the end zone. And it's taken away by the defense, and they desperately needed that turnover. And they'll drag him down after a good return on the interception. Expect some pressure coming from the blitz. To the air, it's Madsen. He's going up top here late in the game. And they took a shot on that one, but couldn't make the connection. It's incomplete. Couldn't make the connection last time. Let's see if they throw it again. 2nd down, they'll go to the air. Pocket breaking down. And he can't find anyone open, and down he goes. A sack here late in the 4th. On 3rd and long, you'll have to turn it loose deep. Trying to make magic on the scramble. Short gain on the play before he slides. Down 4 late, they have to convert on 4th down to keep hope alive. Desperate to convert, and he'll throw it.
Well, the defense is smelling blood in the water. As soon as they saw this offense decide to go for it in that area of the field, they were like, okay, you're going to gift us the football. We'll go ahead. We'll take over. Thanks. We'll make a play, and we'll take this.
Into the end zone he goes. Touchdown, Seminoles. When you're handed a break with unbelievable field position like that, you better finish the deal, and they did.
You saw the quarterback jog on the field. I think he gave a high five to every one of those players coming off that just put them in position to go score that touchdown. That QB knew this was a golden opportunity, and boy, he took advantage of it.